Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Steady English Stories. Close your eyes for a moment, my friend. Picture yourself inside a noisy, smoky music hall in England. In the year 1894, the room is full of loud soldiers, drinking, laughing, shouting. On the small wooden stage, a woman is singing. Her voice is sweet but tired, and then her voice breaks. It simply stops working, like a string snapping. The crowd, rough and impatient, begins to boo. Someone laughs cruelly. The woman stands frozen, ashamed, unable to continue. Standing in the shadows at the side of the stage is her son. He is only 5 years old. The stage manager looks at the boy. He has heard this child sing before, quietly, at home. In desperation, he pushes the boy forward, out into the bright lights, in front of the same crowd that was just booing his mother. What do you think happened next, my friend? Did the boy freeze in fear, or did something in him come alive? This is the true story of Charlie Chaplin, a name almost everyone on Earth recognizes. The small man with the bowler hat, the little mustache, and the funny walk. But behind that famous, smiling face is a childhood so hard, so painful, that few people who love his films ever truly learn it. Chaplin's rise from that terrible night in 1894 to becoming the most famous man on the entire planet is one of the most remarkable true stories in all of history. Before we continue, my friend, if stories like this help you learn English in a calm, steady way, please subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing, and it helps this small channel grow, one listener at a time. Now, let's step back even further to where this story truly begins. Charles Spencer Chaplin was born in London, England, on April the 16th, 1889, in a poor part of the city called Walworth. Both of his parents worked in music halls, noisy theaters, where singers, dancers, and comedians performed live for paying crowds. His father, also named Charles, had a fine singing voice, but he was also a heavy drinker and a man with little sense of duty. He left the family early, providing almost no money and almost no presence in his son's life. That left young Charlie in the care of his mother, Hannah. Hannah performed under a different name on stage, Lily Harley, and for a few years, her small income from singing was enough to keep the family fed. She was warm, imaginative, and loved to entertain her sons at home, singing, dancing, and imitating other performers, just to make them laugh. Chaplin later said that everything he understood about performing, he first learned by watching her. But Hannah's health was fragile. Fragile means easily broken, weak. Her singing voice would sometimes fail without warning, cracking in the middle of a performance. And on that particular night, in 1894, at a rough military theater called the Aldershot Canteen, her voice failed one final time, the time that changed everything. When young Charlie was pushed onto that stage, he did not freeze. He began to sing a popular song of the day, and the soldiers in the crowd, surprised and delighted, began throwing coins onto the stage. The boy, clever, even at 5 years old, stopped singing partway through and calmly announced that he would pick up the money first, before continuing his song. The crowd roared with laughter. It was the first time in his life that Charlie Chaplin made a room full of strangers laugh, and it was also, sadly, one of the last times his mother ever performed. Her voice never fully returned. What do you think it must have felt like, my friend, to discover you had a gift on the very same night your mother lost hers. The years that followed were desperately hard. Hannah struggled to find steady work, sewing clothes by hand to earn a little money. The family moved from one cheap, crowded room to another. And when Charlie was only 7 years old, poverty finally became too much. Hannah was forced to admit herself and her 2 sons, Charlie and his older half-brother Sidney, into a workhouse. A workhouse, my friend, was a harsh institution for the very poorest people in Victorian England, part shelter, part prison, where families were often separated, given uniforms, and made to follow strict, cold rules. Charlie remembered his time there, and at the charity school he was sent to afterward, as a lonely, frightening period of his childhood. He was separated from his mother. He wore rough clothes. He slept among strangers. Just a few years later, when Charlie was only 14, an even harder blow arrived. His mother's mind, weakened by years of poverty, illness, and hunger, finally broke down completely. Hannah was declared mentally unwell and was sent away to an asylum, a hospital for people with serious mental illness. Charlie and Sidney, still just boys, were now almost entirely alone in the world. Most children facing this much hardship would have simply disappeared into it, forgotten by history. But Charlie Chaplin carried something inside him that refused to stay quiet, the same spark that had made a room full of drunken soldiers laugh and cheer. On the very night his whole world had started falling apart, that spark was about to lead him somewhere far beyond the workhouses of London. But first, this small boy, with almost nothing to his name, would have to survive being completely alone. Charlie Chaplin did not disappear into the London workhouses, my friend. Somehow, he held on to that small spark he had discovered on stage at 5 years old, even through the loneliest years of his childhood. At the age of 8, still barely more than a child himself, Chaplin joined a group of young performers called the 8 Lancashire Lads. They toured the country as a clog dancing troupe. Clog dancing is a fast, rhythmic style of dance performed in wooden shoes. It was hard work, and it paid very little. But it was also Chaplin's first real training as a performer, and it kept him fed, kept him housed, and kept him one step away from the workhouse gates. From there, Chaplin worked steadily through his teenage years, small stage roles, comic sketches, walk-on parts in plays. By the time he was 19 years old, in 1908, he had joined one of the most respected comedy troupes in all of England, the Fred Carnot Company. Carnot's shows were famous across Britain for their skillful physical comedy, falling, stumbling, chasing, all performed with careful, practiced timing. Chaplin, trained in hardship since childhood, turned out to have a natural gift for this kind of comedy. In 1910, the Carnot Company sailed to America to perform on tour. Chaplin was 21 years old, and by his own account, wildly ambitious. A fellow performer on that same ship, a young man named Stan Laurel, who would later become famous himself, remembered Chaplin running to the ship's railing as land came into view, shouting that all of America would soon know his name. What do you think, my friend? Is it foolish to believe something that big about yourself when you still have nothing to your name? It did not take long for Chaplin to be proven right. During a second American tour with Carnot's company in 1912, Chaplin was spotted performing on stage by Max Sennett, the owner of a fast-growing film company in California, called Keystone Studios. Sennett was impressed enough to offer Chaplin a contract, $150 a week, rising later to $170, more than double what Chaplin was earning with Carnot. In September 1913, Chaplin signed the contract. By December, he had arrived in Hollywood, ready to begin his very first work in motion pictures. His first film was, by most accounts, unremarkable, a stiff, awkward performance in unfamiliar filmmaking in 1914 was still new, chaotic, and fast-paced, and Chaplin, used to carefully rehearsing every stage movement for months, struggled at first to adapt. But then, while preparing for one of his next short films, Chaplin quickly assembled a costume from spare pieces lying around the studio. A coat too small for him, trousers far too large, oversized floppy shoes, a battered bowler hat, and, as a final touch, a small painted-on mustache. He later said that the moment he put the costume on, before he had even planned who the character would be, he suddenly felt exactly who this person was. This character became known as the Little Tramp, a poor, gentle, endlessly resilient man, always dressed with strange, mismatched dignity, always knocked down by the world, and always, somehow, standing back up again. Resilient means able to recover quickly after difficulty. And no one, my friend, understood resilience better than Chaplin himself. The Tramp was an overnight sensation. Within months, without audiences even knowing his real name, Chaplin had become the most popular figure in film comedy. Movie theaters advertised his films by simply showing a drawing of the bowler hat and cane. By 1916, his contract with a new studio, Mutual Film Corporation, paid him $670,000 for 12 short films, an almost unimaginable sum of money at the time, along with something even more valuable to him: complete creative control over his own work. Think about that, my friend. A boy who once slept in a London workhouse, separated from his own mother, was now, in his 20s, one of the most powerful and most recognized men in the entire world. But here is where the story begins to grow complicated, my friend. Fame, this enormous, did not simply bring joy. It also brought pressure, scrutiny, and expectation. Scrutiny means being closely and critically watched by the public. As the First World War spread across Europe, some newspapers in Britain criticized Chaplin harshly for remaining in America instead of returning home to fight, even though he had, in fact, attempted to enlist and had been rejected for medical reasons related to his small size and frame. It was Chaplin's first real taste of a truth he would learn again and again in the years ahead. The more famous a person becomes, the less control they have over their own story. At the same time, Chaplin's personal life was becoming increasingly complicated too, a pattern of hasty marriages and painful, publicized separations that would follow him for decades. And that stood in sharp, uncomfortable contrast to the gentle, beloved character he played on screen. By 1919, still only in his 20s, Chaplin had become one of the most powerful figures in the entire film industry. Joining with 3 other giants of early Hollywood, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, too, found their own film distribution company, giving artists like themselves far greater control over their own work. Chaplin now stood, my friend, at the very peak of what seemed possible for one man to achieve: global fame, enormous wealth, and creative freedom that almost no performer in history had ever held before him. But peaks, as this story will show, are rarely where a person is allowed to simply stay. The years that followed Chaplin's peak, my friend, brought a slow, painful turn in his story. Chaplin's personal life, complicated for years by hurried marriages and public separations, drew increasing criticism from the press and the public. In the 1940s, he also faced a bitter paternity lawsuit, a legal case over the fatherhood of a child brought by a young actress named Joan Barry. Blood tests at the time actually showed Chaplin was not the father. But under the law in California at that time, this scientific evidence could not be used in court, and Chaplin lost the case regardless. It was a painful, public humiliation for a man once adored by nearly everyone. At the very same time, my friend, a much larger storm was building around Chaplin, one built not on his personal choices, but on his political opinions. As tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union deepened after the Second World War, a wave of fear spread across America about communism, a political and economic system built on the idea of shared ownership. Anyone even suspected of communist sympathies could find their career, their reputation, and their freedom under serious threat. Chaplin had never joined the Communist Party, but he had spoken out publicly against certain American government committees that were investigating suspected communists in the entertainment industry, believing those investigations violated people's basic freedoms. This was enough. The FBI, led by Director J. Edgar Hoover, built a file on Chaplin that would eventually grow to nearly 2,000 pages. Newspapers questioned his loyalty. Politicians openly called for him to be forced out of the country. What do you think, my friend? How much can one person's public voice cost them, even when they have broken no law at all? In September 1952, Chaplin boarded a ship bound for London, along with his wife Una and their children, to attend the premiere of his newest film, Limelight. Just 2 days after the ship set sail, the United States Attorney General announced that Chaplin's re-entry permit, the document allowing him back into the country, had been revoked. If Chaplin wished to return to America, the home he had lived in for nearly 40 years, he would first need to sit for questioning about his political views and his personal conduct. Chaplin refused. Rather than submit to that kind of public interrogation, Chaplin chose exile instead. Exile means being forced to live away from your own home country. He settled quietly in Switzerland with his family, and he would not set foot in the United States again for 20 years. Here, my friend, is where Chaplin's story takes its final, remarkable turn. In Switzerland, Chaplin found a life he had never truly known before, calm, private, surrounded by his family. He continued working, re-releasing his old films, writing his memoirs, slowly rebuilding a legacy that America itself had tried to tear down. And in 1972, 20 years after his exile began, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences invited Chaplin back to Hollywood to receive a special honorary award for his lifetime of work in film. When Chaplin walked out onto that stage, the audience rose to their feet. They did not stop applauding for 12 full minutes, one of the longest ovations in the history of the awards ceremony. The same industry, and in many ways the same country, that had pushed him away now stood openly weeping to welcome him home. 3 years later, in 1975, Queen Elizabeth II granted Chaplin a knighthood, officially making him Sir Charles Chaplin. He died peacefully at his home in Switzerland on December the 25th, 1977, Christmas Day, at the age of 8. What do you think, my friend? Is it possible for the very same world that once tried to destroy you to later stand and thank you for everything you gave it? Chaplin's life holds more than one lesson, my friend, and they are worth sitting with quietly. The first lesson is this: the hardest beginnings do not decide the whole of a person's story. A boy from a London workhouse, abandoned by his father and separated from his mother, became one of the most beloved and most recognized human beings who has ever lived. Wherever you are starting from today, my friend, it does not have to be where your story ends. The second lesson is quieter and perhaps harder to hear. Fame, success, and public love are not permanent shields. Even a man adored by nearly the entire world could be cast out, questioned, and exiled, not for breaking any law, but simply for speaking his mind. Chaplin's life reminds us that character and the courage to remain true to your own beliefs matters more in the end than public approval ever can. And this brings us, my friend, to you and to your own quiet, steady journey of learning English. Like Chaplin, you will not always be understood right away. You may stumble over words, just as Chaplin once stumbled through his very first film. You may face moments where progress feels slow, or where others do not yet see the effort you are putting in. But if you keep practicing, keep listening, and keep showing up, story after story, the way Chaplin kept performing through every hardship life placed in front of him one day, your own effort will stand up and speak for itself. So keep going, my friend. Keep listening. Keep learning, one steady story at a time. If this story moved you today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you have not already. It costs you nothing, and it helps this small channel grow. I would also love to know which part of Charlie Chaplin's story surprised you the most. Leave a comment below and tell me. Until next time, my friends, keep learning.